So I have a few practice problems, still using that same information that we just learned about, finding the axis of symmetry in the vertex, and then sketching that parabola. We're not graphing it yet, so it's not going to be a perfect parabola on our graph, but it is going to be kind of just a general idea of what it's going to look like. So we have been given an equation. First thing we need to do is look at our A, B, and C values. So A is equal to 1, B is equal to 4, and C is equal to 5. Excuse me. So here we're going to go ahead and find our axis of symmetry first. So X is going to be equal to negative B, which is 4, divided by 2 times 1, which is our A value. So negative 4 divided by 2 simplifies to negative 2 on that one. So X is going to be equal to negative 2. All right. From there, we need to find our vertex. So we're going to again take that y equals our equation, plug in place of the x, our x value that we just found. So I'm going to plug in a negative 2 and a negative 2. So when I square negative 2, of course 2 negatives becomes a positive. 4 times negative 2 is a negative 8. Add the 5, and I end up with here a positive 1 for my y value. So my vertex is going to be negative 2, 1. So first thing I can do is draw my axis of symmetry. So negative 2, I know that my parabola is going to be symmetric on this line. Okay, and then I need to put in my vertex point. So at negative 2, 1, this is the point where my parabola is either going to be the minimum point or the maximum point. And so we have to decide whether it's minimum or maximum based on that A value. Our A here is a positive 1. So our graph is going to open upwards. So this is going to be a minimum point. That's what our notes were all about. So we are going to just sketch an idea of what that looks like. Basically, I just want to see that you understand that it's opening up at this point. Okay? We'll learn how to graph a parabola later on. All right, so looking at number 2, same process. We have this time our A is negative 1, B is negative 8, and C is negative 17. I'm going to take and plug in those values. So X is going to be equal to negative B, which is a negative 8, divided by 2 times A, which is a negative 1. So here's where those parentheses are so important. I had the negative B as a part of my formula, but then my B value was also negative. So that negative and negative becomes a positive 8, and the 2 times the negative 1 becomes a negative 2. And so we end up with negative 4 here as my axis of symmetry. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw my axis of symmetry over here. I have a vertical line here at negative 4. Okay, and then from this point, I'm going to have to plug that in to find my y value, to find my vertex. So y is equal to negative 4 squared minus 8 times negative 4 minus 17. So again here, when we do our negative 4 squared, we get 16, positive 16, but then we have this negative from the actual equation that multiplies to give us a negative 16. Then our negative and a negative here becomes a positive 32. We bring down the negative 17, and when we simplify, we get negative 1. So vertex here is going to be the point negative 4, negative 1 on our graph. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that point, plot that point on my graph at negative 4, negative 1. And then I have to decide what this graph is going to look like. So I have an A value of a negative 1. So that means it's going to open downward. So it's going to be more of a graph like this. Okay? Just do your best. I know that your parabola is not going to be perfect. Your curve is not going to be perfect. Just make sure it's not a point, but you're actually doing a curve at the top. That's the most important thing here, and that you're opening it up in the right direction. Okay. All right, looking at the third example here. We have a fraction, but there's no need to be afraid of that. We can still work with this. So A here is going to be equal to 1/2, B is equal to 2, and C is equal to 5. So in our axis of symmetry formula, we're going to put in negative B, which is 2, divided by 2 times our A value, which is 1/2, which is odd that you would see a fraction in a denominator, but when we simplify, it'll take care of that. So we have negative 2 divided by 2 times 1/2, which is 1. So negative 2 divided by 1 is negative 2. So that's going to be our axis of symmetry. We're going to have a line at negative 2. Okay, so from there, we need to find our vertex. So I'm going to plug this in. So y is equal to, and here's my equation. I'm going to have 1/2 times x, which in this case is negative 2, squared, plus 2 times negative 2 plus 5. And now when I plug all of this in, I end up with negative 2 squared is 4. 4 times 1/2 is 2. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4 plus 5. And when we simplify that, we end up with 3. So my vertex here is x value of negative 2, y value of 3. And so I can plot that point right here on my graph. And then I look at my a value. Okay, 1/2 is positive, so this is going to be going upwards as well. Okay. All right, so just keep in mind that it's the same process each time. We're going to continue doing the same thing on the last few examples as well. So looking at the next example that you have here, let me slide my paper down. We have 2x squared minus 16x plus 28. So again, my a value is 2, my b value is negative 16, and my c value is 28. So I'm going to plug those into my axis of symmetry formula. B is a negative 16. The formula is negative b. And then 2 times a, which is 2. So those two negatives, again, cancel out, and you get 16, and 2 times 2 is 4. So 16 divided by 4 is 4, so my axis of symmetry is 4. So this time I'm going to have a positive axis of symmetry. So I'm going to be moving to the right on my x-axis and drawing my vertical line right there. All right, from there, I look for my vertex. So I'm going to plug in these points once again into that same equation. So 2 times 4 squared minus 16 times 4 plus 28. Fix that, plus 28. There we go. All right, so when we simplify this, again, you could plug this straight into your calculator. That would be perfectly fine. Or you can simplify it on your own, however you want to do it. You could simplify it on your own and then check with your calculator. That would probably be your best option. That way you're getting practice with both, and you know that your answer is correct. But 4 squared is 16 times 2, which is going to be 32, minus 16 times 4, which is 64, plus that 28. When we simplify that, we're going to get a negative 4. So our final answer here for our vertex is going to be x value of 4, y value of negative 4. So I'm going to mark that point. I'm going to go down 4. It's going to be right here. Again, my a value is where I check. It's a 2, so this is going to open upwards. Okay. All right, and then the last question that we have here is x squared, sorry, there's two more, x squared minus 7. So we have a is equal to 1, and then here's where we have a little bit of maybe some question about what to do. B, remember, is my value, my coefficient in front of my x with an exponent of 1, and there isn't that middle term of bx in this example. So my b value is going to be a 0 because it doesn't exist in this equation. And then my c, which is my constant value, is the negative 7. So don't get tripped up by a question like that. Just kind of think it through, and logically, that's what you can come up with. So x is equal to negative b, which in this case is 0, divided by 2 times a, which is 1. And of course, 0 isn't really positive or negative, so it's going to be 0 divided by 2, which is 0. So our axis of symmetry is 0. It's going to be on the y-axis. It's going to run that same line. So you can't really see my axis of symmetry there, but it is going to be right there on the y-axis. Now I'm going to take that and plug it into my equation to find my y value. So x squared is going to be 0 squared minus 7. Of course, that simplifies to 0 minus 7, which is negative 7. So my vertex here is 0, negative 7. So I'm going to be putting my point at negative 7 on the y-axis. Okay, and so now I check my a value is, of course, 1, so it's going to open upwards. Okay. And then my last example here is y equals 2/3 x squared plus 3. So again, I'm going to go ahead and write out my a equals. In this case, it's 2/3. B is not there. There's not a middle term, so we're just going to do b is 0, and c is equal to 3. So I'm going to plug this in to my equation. So x is equal to negative, in this case b is 0, and then 2 times a, and in this case a is 2/3, which again when we simplify is going to look odd because we end up with 0 divided by 4/3. We don't like to have a fraction under a fraction bar, but anything that we're dividing by 0 is going to be 0, so it all works out there. So our axis of symmetry here is 0 again, so it's going to run right there on that y-axis. And then we are going to do our vertex point. So I'm going to take that y equals, plug this in, 2/3 times 0 squared plus 3. 0 squared is 0. 0 times 2/3 is 0. And so when I simplify that, I get that y is equal to 3. So my vertex here is going to be 0, 3. I'm going to put my point 1, 2, 3 right here. And then I am going to graph it upwards because my 2/3 is a positive value. And so that's the basics for finding axis of symmetry, for finding vertex points, and just kind of knowing generally what that parabola is going to look like. We're going to get deeper into graphing them and solving quadratics and things like that in the coming days.